Hey, I'm glad you're tuning in today because we have a very important subject to cover. Very actual also, considering what's happened recently with chat messages and people's bags getting stolen from restaurants. We're going to talk cybersecurity today. Cybersecurity in both the business and the professional space, because unfortunately our lives are so intertwined that these things are not distinguishable necessarily. They run from one thing into the other, and I have the best guest today here to talk about this subject. He's my friend Bryce Austin. He is, like me, a speaker and a consultant. He has his own business called TCE Strategy, and he's the leading voice in emerging technologies and, of course, cybersecurity. He also has a corporate career, or had a corporate career, with companies like Target and Wells Fargo. So, yeah, totally the right voice to talk on a podcast like this about a subject like this. Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Welcome, Bryce.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'm very glad you're joining us today. And to kick off this subject, can you give us an example story of a business emergency in the cybersecurity space?
Oh, there are so many. I think a recent one that really got my attention was on a fellow small business owner, and he was putting on a large conference at a hotel to where the bill for renting out the hotel and its facilities was well over $100,000. Well, he showed up at the hotel and they said, "I'm so sorry, we haven't received payment." And he said, "What are you talking about? We sent it 2 weeks ago." Well, what happened is that someone had gotten in to his CFO's email account and had been laying in wait for months and months trying to find a large money transfer that was going to take place. So as soon as the cyber criminal saw the wiring instructions come in from the hotel to the CFO, the cyber criminal manipulated them into an account of their own. The CFO did not call the hotel to make sure these were correct, sent the money, and by the time they showed up at the hotel, it had long since vanished. Regrettably, that person's having to declare bankruptcy in that particular business. It was such a large loss that it's unrecoverable.
Oh, so there's no protection in place against these situations?
Well, there could be. If you willingly send money to another bank and you ask your bank to do that, it's not the bank's fault. No one's claiming that you weren't duped. You were duped, but that wasn't the fault of the bank. The bank's take on that is that you could have walked into the bank and say, "I want $250,000 in cash," walked out with it and given it to someone on the street. That wouldn't be the bank's fault either. Now, you can have cybersecurity liability insurance that covers situations exactly like this. Regrettably, my friend did not have that kind of coverage, so it was simply a total loss.
Okay, well, yeah, scary story, actually. But we talk a lot about risk on this podcast. So can you talk a little bit about people like you and me, or, normal professional citizens of this world? Are we all, is it like a lottery? Do we all have kind of equal chances to get caught by this? Or is certain situations or certain businesses or certain type of affairs much more at risk to this? How would I determine if I'm in a high risk category and might need something like that insurance for my business? How do I think about that?
Sure. So 15 years ago, if someone came into my office when I was at Wells Fargo and said anyone could be a risk of cybercrime, I would have laughed them out of the office. You had to be a specific target. You had to be the CEO of Wells Fargo. You had to be a politician. You had to be Katy Perry. That's not true anymore. Now it does happen to everybody. It does happen to people like you and me. Heck, I have had family members literally show up at a bank because they got an email from someone pretending to be Microsoft. And there was a problem with their computer and they had to call this number. So they called the number and now their bank accounts were in jeopardy. And what they really need to do is to pull the money out of that account because it's at risk and put it into this other account because it's safer. Well, that other account is the cyber criminal's account. And I'm talking about relatives of mine. This isn't some far-fetched kind of deal. We are very much at risk of cyber criminals. The issue that we have, Maartje, is that we've taken the world and shrunk it to the head of a pin when you go into cyberspace. I'm old enough to remember when websites started with www, and that stands for World Wide Web. Well, the difficulty is we do not have a worldwide government that sets up what is and isn't lawful behavior, reasonable behavior, ethical behavior. That doesn't exist. So in some countries, it's not that their law enforcement is willing to look the other way to cyber criminals. They get a pat on the back if they go after the right targets in the right country. And regrettably, the United States is a very, very significant target.
Yeah, so it's become weaponized, of course, entirely. So somebody with a more complex name like myself, do I stand a better chance to be safe then?
Slightly, but not
significantly.
No, not granted. If you have a name like Jack Smith or Muhammad or what have you, yeah, that's a little more likely. But no, you're not helping yourself much anymore. What the bad guys will do is when a large system gets hacked, like LinkedIn did in 2016, like Yahoo did in 2013, the bad guys will grab all the email addresses, and in those two breaches, all the passwords too. Well, as soon as they have your email address, what your name was doesn't matter so much anymore. No,
and they can all automate all of it, right? So to avoid all the repetitive misspellings and things like that.
Indeed, they can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about some of these recent examples. If I'm a business owner, right, my people have business stuff all over their personal devices, and everything's connected. So how big of a problem could it be for me as a business owner if an individual that's working for me is subject to a cybersecurity attack?
It's very significant. I'm a big fan of work-life balance, but the thought of work-life separation, that isn't a thing anymore. No. We are all using our personal devices for many, many work purposes. And there are some cases where that is a categorical cardinal sin. You should not be doing that. If you are in the military, discussing any kind of war plans on a personal device, unthinkable. But I don't think the listeners of your podcast tend to be military professionals. And if they are, they're trained not to do that. We're business people. Our employees, without question, have the ability to sink our ship from a cybersecurity standpoint. With the proper education and the proper technology in place, you can very drastically reduce your risk in the cybersecurity space. This is a preventable problem. And that's something I want to make sure that we emphasize on here. Some things are just doom and gloom. Whether or not your house gets hit by a tornado, it does have a lot to do with where you live. But other than that, it's lottery. It's luck of the draw. That's not the case in cybersecurity. They are after easy targets. So when I'm giving a presentation to a larger audience, the example I use is that you want your cybersecurity posture to be a porcupine in a land of squirrels. That doesn't mean you're bulletproof. But it means the hawks will go after the squirrels because they're a much easier target than a prickly porcupine. So if we can porcupinize your business, the odds of you getting hit are far, far less.
Yeah, I love that example. I'm based in New Orleans, and I moved here at a time that carjackings, unfortunately, are at an all-time high. And I had just bought a car. And in the block where I also just rented, somebody got carjacked with their kid in the back of the car. And it was the exact same make and model car. So I freaked out. And the first thing I did is that I went to all the tourist shops and bought lots of stickers and put stickers all over the back of my car. And I'm not entirely sure if in my head it's a good deterrent, but it's like, if I'm going to carjack a car, I don't want that car that's so recognizable, right? Because that's going to be hard. I don't know if it works, but it felt like my porcupine tactic. So tell us a little bit more then about what that entails. Is that I'm familiar with like the phishing emails, right? That you're supposed to report to your IT department if you get some of these. And I've been subjected to a bunch of training around expert controls, etc. So I assume similar things are possible. But what are some of the biggest ticket items to look for or to work on that would
Sure.
get you more spikes?
Let's talk about categories of cybersecurity.
Okay.
Ransomware is a big one. We'll discuss that. Wire fraud transfer is huge, absolutely gigantic. Data exfiltration is another big one. Some of the tactics we can use will help all of these buckets, and some of them are more specific.
Okay.
So when it comes to things that will help general cybercrime, all of these sorts of areas, having good, strong passwords. Now, you've heard that before, but I want you to think about it a little differently. It's impossible for a human to remember 100 different complex passwords. We just can't do it. So most people either use the same password everywhere, or they use a variation on a theme. My favorite password, 1 exclamation point, and then my favorite password 2, or my favorite password 1 star, or so on and so forth. Here's the problem. If you have an account at Microsoft or Google or your bank, there's an expectation they're going to have a fair amount of cybersecurity in place. And the odds of them losing your password aren't very high. But if you are a fan of some sort of hobby, like I'm a weekend auto racer, so if there was a website called iloveporsches.com and I signed up for it, well, if I'm using the same password at iloveporsches.com, it's like having the same key to the front door of your house with a deadbolt. That's a really important key. Well, I live in Minnesota. We have snowblowers. My snowblower has a key. You know what it is? It's a piece of plastic shaped like a rectangle, and you put it in a slot, and it just opens up 2 contacts. A screwdriver would work great. I'm guessing a wadded up piece of cardboard would work great. It's a snowblower. They don't need the same level of security. But if I use the snowblower key on the front door of my house, I'm taking a very grave risk.
Yeah.
That's what you and your employees are doing, using the same password everywhere. So the only way to solve that is with a password keeper, is with some program where you have one good, strong, complex password to open your vault of passwords. Yeah. And then you have randomized gibberish passwords for everything in your life. I'm up to over 700 different passwords in my life, but this is what I do for a living. One of them is really important. That's the one that opens the vault. Around 5 of them are in scenarios where my password vault can't automatically put the password in, so I have to remember those 5. And the other 695 passwords are 15-character randomized gibberish. And that works really, really well. There are a lot of these password keepers. I'm vendor agnostic. Dashlane is one of them. LastPass is one of them. 1Password, that's the number 1, and the word password is one of them. There are ones built into either your Chrome web browser or into your Apple devices. It used to be called Keychain. I'm a little more leery of those, but I'd rather see you use those than use the same password everywhere.
All right. So you're saying no matter how much we don't want to go there, we do need to go there?
It absolutely. Yes.
If we want to be a porcupine,
you need a password keeper. Now, the good news with these, Maartje, is the first month you use it, you're going to hate it. It's going to be a pain. It's going to be time consuming. And the next 2 or 3 months, as it keeps auto entering your password into various sites because it's the same computer that you've been using and you've unlocked your password vault, you're going to say, oh, this isn't quite so bad. It's kind of getting convenient. 6 months into it, you're going to wonder how you ever lived without this, because most of your passwords will be in there by then, and it will sync to your phone and to your PCs and to your Mac. And you now have an ecosystem where you're not having to put in your passwords anymore because the passwords vault's doing all the work. Okay. So that is one area that I can tell you with certainty. That story I said in the beginning where the person lost $250,000, not only was the CFO using the same password everywhere, the owner of the company had given everyone their password, and it was the same thing. And it was something silly. It was something like Penn and Teller 1971. And not that's actually, that's a kind of lousy password because everybody knows Penn and Teller, but it was something like that. And everybody in the office shared it. Cardinal sin. You don't want to do that. Everyone needs their own password, and they need different passwords everywhere.
All right. Loud and clear. We got to go there.
I'm beating that horse to death.
Yes.
Next thing, multi-factor authentication. For your email accounts, for your bank accounts, if you're a company that has a VPN or a virtual private network that lets you get from the internet into your internal systems, that one's really important too.
Okay.
MFA means that a username and a password isn't enough. You need something else, like a 6-digit code that gets sent to your phone. Now, with a good MFA solution, it will send you the code once, and then it remembers you on the given device, the phone or the computer, and it stops asking you every time. MFA is the closest thing to a silver bullet we have in the world of cybersecurity. So if I could just get people to use different passwords everywhere and turn on MFA for their email accounts, their bank accounts, anything else that they care about, I just solved 3/4 of cybercrime, just like that.
Cool.
Okay.
I don't like either of those, but yeah, I could see how I need to go there, because I like even less the idea of somebody being in all my stuff, right? And
Well said.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about the data leaks? Because I think
absolutely
that is that's a tricky one. We hear maybe less about in the public space, but I've been subject to a project that we were bidding for. I was working with my employer. We were bidding for this project, or negotiating, actually, being the sole partner to get this project. And we had good old-fashioned corporate espionage. So we actually had somebody who broke into our office and got the data.
Wow.
Which is, old school film espionage type stories. But I would imagine it's actually easier to do any of that in the current day and age. And the impact is huge, right? If that means you're losing a multi-billion-dollar contract like we did.
Yeah. That's scary. I will say that if someone has it out for you specifically, that goes beyond the concept of a porcupine in a land of squirrels. Yeah. The analogy I use there is the presidential limousine. So officially, they don't say what the cost of that is, but guesstimates are around $1.5 million. A regular limousine, not that there are too many of those anymore, but they cost around 1/10 that, around $150,000. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that the president would need that sort of protection, and someone would have it out for the president specifically, and they may need to repel things like machine gun fire and what have you.
Different risk profile, right?
Yes, it's a different risk profile.
Yeah, different likelihood.
If someone's willing to break into your office, that's beyond the scope of what my recommendations are going to help with. The good news is that's extremely rare. 99.99% of the time, they're trying to break into your accounts from halfway around the world. And that's the sort of thing that these recommendations can help with a lot. So data exfiltration takes a number of components. If you have on-premise networks, which a lot of companies still do, your data, you need to know where it is and who has access to it. That's actually chapter 2 of my book. Where is your data and who has access to it? Mm-hmm. It's really important to understand, where are the crown jewels? Fort Knox is a very good inventory as to where the gold is. Well, your data, if that is your company's gold, you need to make a list as to what systems it's sitting in, who has access to it, how are those systems backed up, and what would the impact be if you were to lose that data? Mm-hmm. So that's step 1. Yeah. Step 2 is then to limit the number of people that have access to that data. It's very important to back up data somewhere outside of the core system, because if something happens with that system, that's what ransomware is, you're in real trouble. So backups are imperative, but you don't need 18 different places to back up the data, because each one of those is a potential attack vector, where if the system you're backing up to is breached, well, you have a problem.
Yeah, so more is not necessarily better than in this case.
Not always. I really want people to have offline backups, to have a copy of their critical data somewhere literally in a drawer or in a gun safe or in a safety deposit box. It's kind of old school thinking, but it's awfully hard to hack something sitting in a drawer hooked up to nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of limiting backups, limiting access to that data, but really step 1 is knowing where it is.
Yeah. And actually doing some level of business continuity planning, right? And it's intriguing how many times I come in and there was a plan made at some point, and business continuity plans seem to then only address people or the supply chain, and half the time the whole data infrastructure, access to systems, remote, if you need to evacuate, like I live in a hurricane area, right? For instance, it's intriguing how we forget about sometimes the basics in those plans.
It's very easy to forget it, because you don't think it's an issue until it is.
Yeah.
So with data exfiltration, limiting your risk is a big part of it. But as soon as you know the areas it is, the people that need access, then it goes back to making sure, do they have strong passwords for those systems? Do they have multi-factor authentication turned on? Do you have third-party vendors that have access to that data? Because if so, you're only secure as their cybersecurity plan is. Now, with some great big companies like a Microsoft and a Google and an Amazon, there's not a lot that we can do. That'd be like us going to Ford and saying, I want you to build a safer car.
Yeah.
But for your smaller fish, for your custodial staff, are they doing background checks on those people? For small companies that may help you maintain a database or some special program that you use in your business, do those people have cybersecurity 101 in their company? Because if they have access to your data, you've got a potential problem. It's like inviting someone to come live in your house. If they have some nasty disease, well, if they're living in your house, it's going to knock down your family just as easily as it will theirs.
Yeah. Well, Bryce, I hear a lot, especially the, very practical tips about how to become more of a porcupine and, realize that our risk is the same, but we can become less attractive to get targeted. Before we wrap this up, can we talk a little bit about what is it when you do get targeted or you realize you get targeted, or if one of your employees is targeted? What is kind of like a emergency room equivalent in what do you do? Do you go to a specialist? Do you report it? What's the first thing, the kind of starting place?
So if you find yourself the victim of some kind of cybercrime, that's you need help with incident response. That's what it's called. I don't like advertising my company does that, but we do a fair amount of it. I like to live in the proactive world where we're keeping people from being a target, but incident response is a needed task. There are a number of things that you can do. Before you are aware of this, consider a cybersecurity liability insurance policy, because those come with more than just financial help. They will come with help with forensics, help with awareness training, help with reputational damage. That's one area that can be done beforehand. After the fact, well, making sure that as many people as need to be aware of this issue are aware. As soon as you know that your CFO may have been targeted, it's really important that you let all of your vendors know you may be getting fraudulent invoice requests from us. Please don't fall for it. You may need to let your customers know you may be seeing fraudulent invoice requests from us. Please don't fall for it. Now it's a long road to say we're going to let our cat out of the bag. More times than not, I have had businesses have good luck being open and honest with their customers and vendors that they're under some attack, because that would have helped Marriott tremendously. The hotel deal I was talking about in the beginning, if someone had seen this up front and said something as soon as they realized that there was a problem. So that's one area. Another big one is making sure that you have someone helping you. If you have an insurance policy, that's great, but their job is to minimize the amount they're paying out, not to help make you whole. Involving law enforcement, I've had better luck with than many. I've had it be helpful, and generally speaking, I recommend it. But they are there for the greater good or to close the case. It's very unusual they help get any of your money back, and you need to understand that up front. Hiring a company that is going to help you secure your house so that cyber criminals don't try to hit you again really is important, because as soon as you've been a victim once, these cybercrime rings, they share information about who they've hit and how well it worked. So as soon as you are a victim of a significant loss, you are now on a short list of the possibility of being hit again. So you need to raise your cybersecurity profile of your company. And that's what the kind of thing that my company helps with.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Bryce. What I'm hearing is some of the stuff that's important in almost all recovery or when you're in turmoil, right? Which transparency is so useful and important, good communication where you're at. Because even if the situation sometimes was of your own making, not sharing is not making it better for anybody, and doesn't help you recover quicker, and actually might mean that there's more knock-on effect on others too. involving a specialist, right? Having help, bringing somebody on who knows what to look for and help you cover all the bases. Which brings me then to you, Bryce, because if people after having heard you here on the podcast today think, oh, I want to talk to him, I want more of Bryce or more of what he talks about, where do they go? What do they do?
You bet. I am available it's Bryce, BRYCE, at bryceaustin.com. I have two websites, tcestrategy.com, which stands for Technology and Cybersecurity Education, or just bryceaustin.com. You'll notice the website's focused a little more on professional speaking than it is on advisory services, and that's by design. I do both, but for the purposes of this podcast, I think it would be more around advisory services. My company can help with vulnerability assessments, with penetration tests, with third-party vendor negotiations. We have a number of companies where we act as a fractional CISO, or Chief Information Security Officer. And you can think of us like a part-time accountant or an attorney on retainer, where you don't need full-time in-house counsel, but you need 5 or 10 hours a month of good, unfettered advice to help keep your legal house in order. Well, we help keep your cybersecurity house in order.
Fabulous. And you're just making the point for me again that I made plenty of times, that there is a lot of consultants and specialists out there who are not trying to sell you maximum hours, who are trying to sell you actually fit for purpose services so that you can run your business in the most efficient and best way possible, doing what you do best, and leaving some of the tricky stuff to people that do that best, right? So you're, again, also an excellent example of that. So thank you for making that point again. I like that. So Bryce, thank you so much for joining me today here. Before we sign off, do you have any final wisdom around chaos or overcoming turmoil or getting out of tricky situations, or something that's really helped you? Anything to send the listener off with?
You bet. If there is one thing I wish I could get across to all of my clients, it's that you can't put a seatbelt on after the car accident. Proactive work is so much more effective than reactive response. If I can get you to change passwords on your email accounts to something unique and complex, that's a giant step forward. If I can get you to even look at a password keeper and give it a 14-day trial, that's a giant step forward. Now, if you don't, and if you're in trouble, and if you need help, call me anyhow. I would love to help, but it makes me feel a whole lot better when the bad guys never get through the door, as opposed to my team helps clean up the mess.
I love that. And it was loud and clear, and I will go and do the needful because, I'm a sinner in that sense. So thank you all for tuning in today. I hope to hear or see you on the next episode. And thanks again, Bryce. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Emergency Room. If today's episode hit home, let me know. Leave a review and tell me what challenges you're facing. Your feedback helps shape future episodes. So drop a comment or a message on LinkedIn with what's keeping you up at night.